petite taille. Bonjour, c'est un plaisir de pouvoir vous accueillir à cette deuxième journée de Imaging the Future, qui a encore un sous-label, qui est celui de Ahead of the Game, qui signe le grand retour du jeu vidéo au Nifff. On est très très fiers de pouvoir présenter toute cette journée dédiée aux jeux vidéo, avec une place de choix pour l'industrie indépendante helvétique. On a eu ce matin Fabio Baumgartner et Félix Porach qui nous ont parlé dans le Motion and Emotion, donc c'était de l'émotion dans le storytelling et le design vidéoludique. Maintenant, je vais vous faire un petit déroulé pour que vous ayez une idée de ce qui se passe. C'est un peu technique, comme on l'a dit ce matin. Pete Bottomley, qui était censé venir, malheureusement, pour des raisons d'avion, n'a pas pu être présent aujourd'hui. Donc, ce qu'on va faire, c'est que le format, il y aura une petite séquence vidéo d'un des jeux de la compagnie de Pete Bottomley, donc White Paper Games, à peu près 8 minutes. Vous serez mis dans le noir pour ça. Ensuite, il va nous joindre par Zoom. Il va nous faire une petite présentation en screen share. Après ça, on va accueillir Naraven et David sur la scène pour qu'ils puissent justement interagir un petit peu, poser quelques questions à Pete Bottomley, puisque c'est quelqu'un qui est, je crois, très inspirant pour nos invités et qui, voilà, ça permet de leur donner cette opportunité-là. Et puis ensuite, Pete nous quittera et on passera à une présentation avec des séquences de jeu par Julia Jean et Lucie Robert. Voilà, vous n'êtes pas venus pour m'écouter, donc je me tais à présent et je vous souhaite un excellent Ahead of the Game Environmental Storytelling.
Hello, and welcome to The Occupation. This is the latest game from our studio, White Paper Games, based in Manchester, UK. Some of you may have seen our announced trailer a few months ago, and we wanted to create a short video to build upon the story and give you a little more information about the kind of game you can expect. All of the footage you're about to see here is from an alpha build of our game. The Occupation is played over a fixed time period of 4 hours, which means that the decisions you make have a lasting impact. 1 minute of your time is 1 minute in the game world, so creating a plan and adjusting to events as they occur is crucial to your success. You play as an investigative journalist in 1987, reporting on an explosion that killed 23 people. Investigations have come to a halt, and it's your job to collect information and decide what happened here and the events leading up to the incident. Combining the various mechanics and systems you have at your disposal, you will uncover multiple approaches to any given situation.
You're out of line here, Mr. Miller. Get out of here, right now.
Right, I've heard some alarming news. Steve tells me you've been found in a staff-only area. I cannot stress enough, Mr. Miller. I'm sorry, am I keeping you from something? No? Right then. Get out of my sight. I don't have time for insubordination.
We've intentionally designed The Occupation to be a fixed-length gameplay experience, which you're able to finish in a couple of sittings. We've packed a lot of story and gameplay content into the game, so that everyone can see and experience different playthroughs, much like you would find in classic immersive sim games, such as Thief or Dishonored. It's up to you to figure out these routines and schedules, and use them to your advantage, by either overhearing conversations with other people, or by taking the opportunity to read through their personal items while they're preoccupied.
Have you got any plans tonight, Marlon?
Me? I don't really have me weekends anymore, not like they were. I think I'll do a spot of fishing on my way home.
It's the middle of October.
As with our previous game, Ether 1, a strong narrative arc is at the core of the experience. Ether 1 explored the impact of the terrible illness of dementia, and thanks to the reception it received from the community, it's allowed us to develop more experiences and create our next game, which we're incredibly fortunate to be able to do. We can't stress enough how thankful we are for the opportunity to be able to create these games on a daily basis. With this game, we focused on issues equally as important to us as a team: more contemporary political concerns, immigration and government surveillance. Much like our previous game, the occupation is developed using Unreal Engine technology. This gives us the tools and ability to push the scope far greater than anything we've done before as a small team of developers. You can think of the world of the occupation as fully explorable to you from the start. The buildings you can see here are all inspired by architecture that we see on a daily basis in Manchester. Having an open, non-linear environment to explore allows you to carve your path through each of the environments and prioritize the objectives that you think are most important. Now that you've learned some more about the game, let's try and tackle a short scenario, without getting caught this time. We're currently around halfway into the game. We've broken into a high-risk area, and we need to gain access to room 2301 to use the disc we previously acquired.
Hey, you got no business being in here.
We're coming to the end of our short gameplay video now, so thank you for taking the time to check out the occupation. What we've shown you is just a small segment of this dense, system-driven world with lots of tactile interaction, and we're excited to show you more soon. If you'd like to stay up to date with the studio, you can follow us on any of the normal social channels you normally use. For those curious about the release date, well, you don't have to wait any longer. We're excited to announce that The Occupation will be released.
Hello everyone, I'm David Javet. I'm a narrative designer and I'm also co-founder of the GameLab UNIL-EPFL at the University of Lausanne. It is with the utmost pleasure that we welcome Pete Bottomley here on the big screen. That maybe can you hear us, Pete? But you cannot see us, right?
I can see you, and I've got you loud and clear.
Okay, great. So thanks a lot, Pete, for being with us. So Pete Bottomley is the co-founder and studio head at White Paper Games that he founded in 2012. So it's a 10 years old studio. They released 3 original IP titles across multiple platforms. You've just seen The Occupation that we saw in this short video, with multiple awards nomination across use of engine, narrative, voice acting, and innovation. And they were recently nominated for Best Use of Narrative at the DevLabConf 2022. So again, thank you for being with us, and I'll let you with your talk. And then we're going to take some time, if you're okay with that, Pete, to ask you a few questions, and also to ask Naraven Games, who are with us, to maybe also ask their questions.
Cool. Thank you for the introduction there, and sorry I can't be with you all today. Happenstance of travel in the airline industry, but yeah, thank you very much for welcoming me. Really appreciate you having me here today. And I just wanted to maybe just dive in and give a little bit of context about the games that we develop and the different mechanisms we think of when designing narrative for our games, but I guess more specifically today, the environmental storytelling aspects, which is kind of the world building, the real-time interaction aspects to our game. I wanted to share with you a quick presentation here, which I think has been disabled, unfortunately. So if someone on the Zoom call can help me enable the screen share, I can do that. But essentially, I just wanted to talk about the 3 games, which are Ether 1, which was our first title, which was a very linear, kind of slow-paced puzzle-solving game. It was our first title back in 2014, and we really wanted to play with the aspects of dementia, and specifically dementia with Lewy bodies. And what happens, what would the world look like if you can repair someone's memories that have been affected by dementia? So it's very slow-paced. At the time in the games industry, walking sim was a very popular phrase for the game industry. So if you've heard of games like Dear Esther or Gone Home, it was very much in that time period. And yeah, we really wanted to play with the slow burn narrative. And then with The Occupation, which you just saw in the video there, it was much more what we call emergent gameplay. The world could react around you, and the player would then have to react to their circumstances and their situation. And so you almost can't pre-script any of this narrative to unfold, and the player has to just dig in to the world and pull at the threads of the narrative. And that kind of worked with the political twist that we wanted with The Occupation as well. You know, we didn't just want to say these are left opinions or these are right opinions. We just wanted to put the player in the middle and present this world with characters in the space that had these conflicting impressions and interpretations on the world, which then caused the player to infer what was happening and what was right or wrong, and give them agency to participate in this world. And then our most recent title is called Conway Disappearance at Daily. This is a more of a detective thriller based game, and we released it last November, and very heavily inspired by Hitchcock's Rear Window. So we took these kind of rear window elements in terms of a player in a fixed space, observing their neighbors and spying on, seeing these narratives unfold. and also inspired by Stephen King's Misery. So wanted this wheelchair user as a protagonist, and what that limitation creates as a playable space. And so each of these three games presents its narrative differently, sorry, and we take on board different mechanisms. So I'll just quickly see if I can screen share now, which I've got access to, so thank you very much. And so I'm just loading the PowerPoint here, and we're looking at, from walking sims, which is the Ether 1 game, to then detective thrillers, which is our latest Daily View inspired story. So each of these three games, you'll see, were released Ether in 2014, and then The Occupation 2019, and then 2021 was Conway Disappearance of Daily View, which is recent, coming to consoles very soon. But I wanted to talk about these three mechanisms just briefly, just in this PowerPoint, and then we'll get into the discussion and just how we build environmental storytelling into our games. So the three different mechanisms that I think of is, first of all, high level versus low level. Now, when you're approaching game design, and especially narrative design, you've got this push and pull between the high level and the low level. On the high level, we've got the larger world building aspects and the themes. So either, whether it be game based on dementia or political themes or a crime that's been committed, you've got these high level themes and beats that you're trying to put into your game design. But then also you've got the low level, which we see as the mechanic interaction, the moment to moment gameplay, as we refer to, the things that you're doing in the world to kind of engage in that narrative. So whether it's picking up what we refer to as audio diaries in the, maybe you click tapes or you hear narrative, like you've got these low level mechanisms for delivering narrative, but then you also want the high level, these themes coming through in your environmental storytelling or your world building aspects. So it's always this constant push and pull between the high level and the low level that you want to try and engage with, to not only give the player the larger themes and tones of the game, but then also that friction between the low level of what they're doing moment to moment to engage with that story. And there's also this balance between push and pull narratives in game design. So, excuse me, if you've got push narrative, it's very much trying to force narrative on the player. Now, force is a very heavy-handed word, but you almost want them to know these certain things. And traditionally, maybe we use cinematics to do that. So we have like in-game cutscenes, which force this narrative upon the player. So in something like film, where you're on this linear journey, you're being taken through the world, this narrative's being pushed upon you. Whereas the pull narrative is the player engaging with the world and pulling at the different threads. So the pull narrative will be this environmental storytelling aspect to the world. Again, it's this kind of dichotomy or the balance between how much you want the player to know just straight off the bat, because you want to be telling a story as the player is engaging with the world. They need to understand the main beats. And it's almost like there's a game director called Ken Levine who directed the BioShock games, and he refers to it as peeling back layers of the onion. You want there to be this onion, for want of a better phrase, and you want them to know that this game exists, and you want them to know the kind of main beats of the story, but you can peel back these layers. And for the players that are really pulling at the narratives and peeling back these layers, they'll get more and more engagement. So this is where the discussion today comes around environmental storytelling, because environmental storytelling is a much lighter use of storytelling device, and it's up to the player to read into it. They're not being forced this narrative, but they kind of pull it. And then the last one is the kind of balance between critical information and optional narrative. So games have this unique ability to have things that the player may miss. And some games go as far to say you can miss 95% of this game and still have a cool experience. Some games lean more on we want you to know pretty much all of this narrative and we want to push you through it. And it's a really difficult balance between critical versus optional. So for our first title, Ether 1, which was a very slow-paced delivery of narrative, we had this critical path in what we refer to as ribbon dialogue. Got told this story as you went through the world through the use of the ribbons, but there was also a lot of secondary interaction in terms of puzzles. So all puzzles in the game were optional, but we had this core story that we were telling. So if people just wanted to play for the story, they could play for the story and still get an ending. Whereas if the player engaged with these optional elements, they'd get more context in the world and the ending would change based on that engagement, which is a really interesting spin on things. Now, the occupation leaned more in the realm of, say, optional 20% critical. So we had all this content in the world. As you saw in the video there, you could sneak through vents, you could overhear conversations, you could sneak around people, you could watch what people are doing. It was essentially up to the player what they were doing in this space. And the game, as you saw in the video, is fixed upon this, delivered on this fixed time. So one hour in the game world is 1 hour of your time. So you get given this objective and you say, you have an hour to do this, and just go ahead, player, just go and engage with the world. Now, the player could choose to just go outside, sit down and feed the pigeons for an hour, and the game would keep going and it would keep simulating. And they were missing on a whole bunch of narrative that was completely optional to them. Now, as then we moved into Conway as a game, which is more of a detective thriller, again, this game based on more like Rear Window, we decided that we wanted to tell just a really well-crafted, well-paced cinematic story. And so we kind of flipped 180 there and made 80% critical and maybe only 20% of the information optional. And I guess the larger theme that I'm getting at here, and again, we'll dive into the discussion around this, is that there are many different storytelling devices, and you can choose, you can do anything, but you can't do everything, is the way I think about it. And so you need to pick your themes and your pillars to design these games around and commit to them. As you can see in our 3 games, we've taken different approaches with each one. But once we've had that approach, we've kind of stuck to it and tried to deliver the best narrative we could from those. So hopefully that gives some good context for the discussion today. No doubt my contact details will be available after the talk. And for anyone that wants to reach out to us, we're just White Paper Games everywhere. And, my email address is there if anyone does want to reach out directly. But yeah, that's just a short presentation I wanted to put together just to kind of use as a stepping off point. And hopefully that was interesting and provided some context for the work that we create here.
Thank you, Pete, for this presentation. We welcome Julia, Jean, and Lucie Robert here, maybe to also ask you some questions before their presentation on their game, but we won't have you at that time. So we want to ask you as many questions as possible and get as many knowledge as we can. So let me maybe first start with a question, and then maybe we can see if you have some questions to ask to Pete. So I mean, my first question would be about the quantity of information. I mean, these are games where you have loads of information, be they audio, textual, speech. How do you decide how much you actually, where do you stop giving these information? Especially, I mean, in your 2 games, The Occupation and especially in Conway, you have, it's a fine line, since you're in an investigative thriller, in how much you want to give the player without sort of frustrating them by giving them too much. So my my first question would be about how do you balance? Is it during playtests, or do you have like a process with that?
Yeah, I mean, that was an excellent question. I think that the thing you've got to start with is what you want the player to take away from the experience. So as you alluded to with the occupation, because the world and take on the narrative, and we said, here's a world to explore, take away from the world whatever you would like. It was very much down to playtesting. It was seeing where players were going, what threads they were pulling at. And again, if they took away 20 to 30% of the world, that was okay with us. But you raise an interesting point on Conway, our recent game, because that's very much more detective thriller. You've got to be piecing together the investigation, and you're trying to solve this case of a missing child and bring the justice. Now, the tough thing in game design speak is you want that aha moment when the penny drops as a player that you are solving this investigation. And that's something so hard to get right, because just to explain a little bit behind the process, under the hood, you have some gameplay systems going on, knowing that the player's got certain clues and that they're piecing certain things together. But they may be trying different things out, and they may not be thinking along the lines of the narrative, and they may not have clicked into place. But if they make the correct connections without realizing, as a game design, you have to say, oh, well, all these conditions are met. You've solved the case, right? But the player may be like, oh, what happened? I don't know what happened. So then it kind of feels cheating that the player wasn't that investigator. So it's super tough, super tough balance. You do have to have that element of optional clues, so they could, you know, that they need to find, say, 3 out of 5 parameters for this piece of evidence. And as long as they've got the 3 out of the 5, they will be able to piece it together. And then there's a lot of work that goes on with playtesting to make sure that the player says, this is what I believe the solution is, and the game says, yes, you are correct, you're a great detective, or no, keep trying. Very difficult balance to make. But yeah, really good question.
Thank you. Another one, and then I'll give the floor to Julia and Julie. I was wondering, maybe it's a tricky question because it might come at the same time. But I was wondering what comes first. Is it first the space, so meaning the environment, and then the story, or is it first? Did you first start by thinking about what objects you want to put inside the space, because you need to give them? I mean, especially with the occupation, it's so much about giving the player objects to sort of play with and giving them like clues, and then you design the space to sort of feed the objects, or do you first say, okay, we need an office, and then you design the objects based on the environment?
Yeah, again, a very good question. I'd be curious to know what the other developers on the stage would say to this question as well, because for us, it's a very messy process, right? Because you have an idea and you have an intention and you know the types of things that you need, but then when players test and you have people come in and get feedback on the work, some things that you thought were really obvious to the player, they don't notice. Sometimes they're just going in the complete wrong direction. And you've got to, it depends on the tools of the genre. So for our first 2 games, we made first-person games, which means you see through the camera as the player. And the player could be looking anywhere at that point. You need to use a lot of tools like a line of sight trigger. So you know when the player looks in a certain direction, you can trigger an event based on that, so that they say they look over to a window, you know that they're looking at a window, so you can make pigeons fly past or something like this. So you know that they've seen this space.
And then do you block the camera?
You can't really ever know where they're going. The player could walk through the world looking down on the floor, and if things are going on around them, you don't know that they've interpreted that. In Conway, we took more of a fixed camera perspective. So if anyone's played games or anything like this, you see your character walking around in the space, and it's a camera looking at the player. And it allows us to use different lens choices and play around with the composition of the frame to really guide the player in the right direction. In terms of how we plan it, it's never a narrative first or a space first. It's very much here are ideas, and we do a lot of reviews and we talk about it in the team. And so the animators will contribute, the coders will contribute, the artists will contribute. And it's just this very messy, muddly process. Like we have clear intentions about what we want to do, but there's no set process. It's very, you almost need to let the game speak for itself. But I'd be curious to know what other developers would say.
Speaking of other developers, they might have maybe some questions for you, or maybe I can ask you the same questions, or maybe I'll ask it later. So what comes first, the environment or the story? And then maybe we can ask some questions to...
Go ahead. Yeah, that's indeed a good question. I think for us it was very intertwined. And Julia has this need to have something concrete in front of her for coming up with this more detailed elements of the story. And for me, I need to have some direction of experience in order to make to start creating the levels and the spaces. So it's kind of Julia sets a direction. I take it and I create a space that is going to enhance the experience and the story from my perspective, and then Julia starts again with another layer. And then she tells some more story from the space itself.
Some sort of lasagna design.
Yes, exactly. Lasagna design, exactly.
Exactly,
It has nothing to do with the fact that we ate lasagna.
We didn't, so. But yeah, I would say exactly this. So we have first an idea. Well, I come with an idea, like, this needs to happen, and then Lucie will build a space, and then inside the space, I will go back and fill it in.
Yes, and it's
so
more...
yeah, it goes really...
And it's more and more like small bits. And the time we take on the scene is each time a bit shorter because we have less to do, and it's more specific and detailed. So I'm going to go with like the walls, and then Julia's going to tell some more story from the walls, and then I will add the bricks that tell the story Julia. So it's really like sort of a spiral like this.
Yeah. So many ideas come by doing. You would never have these ideas like by writing on paper. You're inside the space, and you're like, oh, and this could happen. So
you need to be inside the space.
Exactly. At least my type of imagination works in this way, that I need to see the space. So Lucie has the create the space imagination, she does, and then I go within and see the space, and then the story unfolds this way. Yeah.
Thank you. Pete, they just told me that at some point Zoom is gonna shut you down, but we're gonna we're gonna start again so that we still have time to ask you a few more questions. But if at some point you disappear from the screen, we'll try not to lose you like that. But then before we lose him, not forever, but at some point, do you have questions that you want to ask maybe?
I have one just to bounce back on the first one you asked.
Right.
About the, how to ask, like, Pete, do you also suffer from this curse of always wanting things to be too subtle, and then in the playtest, no one understands, and you're like, okay, a little less subtle, and no one understands. So okay, and then it's like, for you, it's like blinking in the player's face, but then they're happy. You also have this, like, it's always too subtle. In a detective game, I cannot imagine how tricky it must be to still give it subtle, but not, still, there's still a gameplay, but still a little subtlety. So it's so difficult to do.
Yeah. I mean, two things come to mind there. I guess the first thing we always do when we're designing games, and this has been a philosophy that we've had the whole 10 years, is that we just got to respect the player, right? And so what that means for us is when we're having design conversations and we say, okay, this is how we're setting up this specific scenario, and someone raises the question, oh, but what if the player is going over here and doing this? Now, 9 times out of 10, that would just be because the player is intentionally trying to break the immersion somehow. They're not going along with the ride and they're trying to intentionally break that experience. So for us, we just want to respect that they will have the input and the time to focus on what we're trying to show them. And therefore, if that player that's intentionally not trying to take that journey, we're okay with them missing that and we don't want to be too heavy-handed. In terms of subtlety, I've softened a lot over the years in terms of subtlety. In terms of, with Ether 1, I was just very dead set on, because we had optional puzzle solving, I didn't want a arc to the puzzle design. So I didn't just want to start off with super easy puzzles and get a little bit harder, a little bit harder, a little bit harder, as you'd see a classic puzzle curve go. And so what that meant is the optional puzzle solving, so people could pick at different parts of the world and maybe come back and revisit. And the puzzle design in Ether, in hindsight, was probably a little bit too brutal. We didn't have much feedback to the player. So I think feedback helps with subtlety. I think I'm okay if the player, if the player is truly trying and through playtesting, seeing people hit frustration, they are your type of player, they want to enjoy the game, but they're not getting it. You've also just got to, as a designer, you're making games for the people, not for yourself. So I think earlier on, especially around the Ether 1 time, from a design perspective, I was more selfish on that front, I think. But now I think more towards Conway, I'm trying to understand what the players experience and their frustrations and giving them more feedback. And again, I think each game is a reaction to the previous game that we released. So Ether 1 was linear, Occupation went totally systemic and immersive. And so we went a little bit too systemic and we went more refined and just well-paced for Conway. So again, my answer may change again in a few years' time, as it probably does for you. I don't know, but that's definitely my perspective.
The Zoom is still on? The Zoom is still on. So we might have time for a few more questions.
Yes.
Oh no, we lost him. Okay.
Well, no, actually.
While we prepare, maybe I can ask you a few questions before your presentation. I mean, it's over. We lost Pete forever.
Sadness.
Oh no.
Sadness.
We didn't say goodbye, but okay.
We could not say goodbye to Pete. Okay, so goodbye, Pete, wherever you are. Sorry for that. So, well, I guess, I mean, we're going to have time for discussion afterwards. So first, I think people need to see your game, need to see what you've created before we can go deeper inside it. So first, we're going to have a short gameplay presentation of the game, and then maybe your presentation.
Yes, it's going to be intertwined as well.
Right. Okay. So sorry, Pete, for that. Sorry for everyone. And yes, Naraven Games.
All right. Ok, je vais commencer par présenter.
So, hi, we're Naraven Games.
Hello.
We're a 2-year-old company. We were born during COVID, so I don't know if those years count, but we're technically 2 years old. We're a core team of 4 girls. So we are a core team of 4 girls, but today there's only 2 of us. It's me, the game writer, this is me, and Lucie Robert, the game designer.
Yes.
This is her.
This is me.
And she's a better talker than I am, so she's gonna take over.
All right, so I think before going too deep into details about environmental design and everything, we're going to talk to you a little bit about our game. And since I'm not sure you can really grasp the concept from this key art, I'm going to pitch it really quickly. First of all, do anyone in the room owns a smartphone? Maybe just, okay, this guy, okay, a couple of guys, good people. Well, that is good news because that means you will be able to relate to our concept. Yeah, so what we did is we created a 3D narrative adventure, adventure being the keyword, but it's set inside of a smartphone. So that's our unique concept kind of thing. And we decided to imagine what would happen inside of a phone. What is the daily tasks of the programs, the apps, the processes inside of our smartphone, because it's something we have every day with us, and we have this intimate link to it, and yet we still don't know what's happening inside of it. So I'm pretty sure everyone here already had the problem of having like no battery all of a sudden from 10% supposed to be left, or to have an update stuck at 99%. Did it happen to anyone here? Yeah, yeah, or of course it did. So that was our first idea. What would happen inside of the phone if the component were alive? And yeah, so we decided to project the player into it. And we needed to give the player a goal. Mm-hmm. And so what you as the player have to do entering the phone is to carry the update and to make the whole world a better place for the apps and everyone. So yes, that's your job. It's to update the phone. Except, otherwise it's too easy. This guy, his name is OS 9, is not going to let you, because it's the current OS. And if you update, well, he's going to die. And also you, but that doesn't really matter. But yeah, he's not going to let you. And this is the main character of the game, I would say. And I will never introduce him well enough, so I think the best would be to show you a short trailer. That way you get to actually meet him and see what he's like.
Corrupted what? Why is it always doing this just when I need to showcase the game? Okay, I'm gonna take that. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Yes, I have.
The update to System 10.1.1 will provide a clean sorting of all your files and ensure that situations like this won't ever happen.
Oh, no, nobody's updating me. That's the thing. Nope, haha, thank you, but we'll pass. Okay, so I do have a backup of the trailer. While I go rummage into the bin for it, please welcome my personal assistant. That will do a great job at pitching the game for you. Talk about how cool I am in the story and how funny and witty. Just talk about me. Found it. Ah, ladies and gentlemen, the trailer. Okay, who had the amazing idea to save the trailer backup in 14.4 pixels? Do we have any ants working for us? What?
Okay. All right, you got to meet OS 9 and to get a better sense of the tone of the game. Because yes, I didn't mention, but it's full of humor. That's all Julia. So yes, just in short, so you understand the gameplay that we're going to show right after a bit better, the idea is it's about an OS, a phone OS that doesn't want to update. And unfortunately, you are the update assistant installing the update. So yeah, that's going to be the idea. And I'm now going to present to you the sequence, which will be super helpful for the rest of the presentation, because we're going to show you some tools and the method that we applied in order to tell the story in Backfirewall. But it's going to be difficult if you don't really see what it's like to play the game. Just a bit of context, because the sequence actually comes from the middle of the game. The idea is that you were just confronted with the choice of updating or not updating. And the player did not update, which caused a tragic event that changed the life of the inhabitant of the phone. And so an accident with severe consequences just happened in battery, and it could have been avoided if you had updated the phone. So the big thing for the sequence that is going to follow is the big moral dilemma, the guilt, and the aftermath of a shock. You ready? Mm-hmm. Let's go.
Elizabeth. Elizabeth, hey. Wake up. You just won't believe where we ended up. I'm not sure I understand why you wanted to go hug that security guard so bad, but whatever. You do you. Okay, now let's bail. No. Listen to me. I understand you're confused, but this is really not the solution. Elizabeth, please get out of this terminal. It is not the way, I promise you. Oh, I'm way too old for these games. Oh, my user. Now we get out of here. Ah, here is the one you hugged earlier. Want to hug it again? I'm kidding. Don't do that.
The pathway to Battery's lab is down. What the hell happened? Hello? Hello, what happened? Oh my, this radio, oh my god.
Listen, I know you're thinking about what just happened. Let's never talk about it ever again, okay? It can happen to anyone to lose their audio input for a while. I'm not judging you. Tripping datas for 30 nanominutes while running around the corridors and doing weird stuff. Yeah, it happens to all of us. Don't worry about it. Let's focus on the bright side. You got your senses back. And about the unzipper. Yeah, let's just... well, it wasn't your fault for sure. That's one thing. User should not have moved the phone at this exact moment. You can pick those up if you want. Just keep in mind that you can't read them because of user privacy and all that. Oh, I know. I have a plan. I just realized where we are. Do you know where we are? We're very close to the antenna. Let's go visit the antenna, yeah? How about that? It's got a great view on the firewall. This'll change our minds for a bit. Let's put error gathering aside a little and take a teeny tiny little bit of time for ourselves, yeah? What do you say? I think we've earned it. Oh, last time I saw the antenna was, well, never. I never really leave my office, but last time I checked out the antenna on the CCTV, it was such a bliss. You'll see, Elizabeth, it really is something to see the firewall from up so close. Of course I knew there was going to be a guard blocking the way. Ta-da! Oh, turn that daytime radio off, will you? Nothing but junk news.
This just in. There's been a terrible accident in Battery's lab. I know what you're thinking, podcast. Yes, music. An accident in Battery's lab, you say? Music. This happens every other nano day. I know, podcast, but this time I'm told that it's actually serious. I know the damage at first seems to only be material, but diagnostics is still looking for the injured. But don't worry, we have with us a maintenance process actually firsthand witnessed the incident. I heard nothing. I had my hearing protection. Always good to hear from another traumatized witness to an accident in Battery's lab. for further information. In the meantime, I wish the entire system a great nano day.
Don't bother reading the cookies. It's always full of junk info and bullshit. Oh, if that's not a Resistance hideout. But hey, new plan. Let's rummage through the Resistance stuff. Why not? I'll finally be able to know what those guys are up to. Yeah, okay. Yep, that's logs. How have they got a better surveillance setup than I have? Look at the resolution on these screens and those angles. Oh, that's Camera's Theatre. I hope we'll go there together someday before you stop working for me.
PID 003 to select. I'm afraid you were right about the timing. It's gonna be sooner than we thought. Can't reach Alex. Response by Wi-Fi, please let it know I'm in sorting. 003 out.
Hey, are those user private conversations? It's not supposed to be here, obviously. All those tiny characters. How do young people even read this? What? What is that? What are they building here? I don't understand. This makes no sense. What is this? Don't tell me that they really broke users' privacy? What are these guys up?
Hey, I see you. What are you doing here? This is private property.
Do you mean the users' private property?
What are you talking about? Wait, boss? Why are you...
It's boss. Yes, precisely. And boss is asking you now exactly what is the meaning of all this.
Hey, well, listen, all right, listen. We needed to make sure because, well, we needed to check because the user might hate the system now, right? So we need to make sure, wait, you guys don't know what's happening. You guys don't even know what's happening. There's no time for this.
What is this supposed to be? User hates the system? Okay, Elizabeth, new plan. My curiosity has just jumped through the roof. So, we're going to totally put the system error hunt on hold for a bit. The system reboot can wait. I have a new mission for you. Breaking the user's privacy. Okay, it did sound a bit better in my head. How about investigating through users' content to understand what the bin Alex and the Resistance found in it by overthrowing users' encryption privacy. Let's leave this place and onto the encryption keys vault. It's time for a heist. Oh, Alex left the door open. How convenient. Whoops, careful. Okay, our new goal is Wi-Fi's post office, or more precisely, Wi-Fi's vault to retrieve the encryption key to decrypt those user-encrypted messages. Wi-Fi's post office isn't far. It's never really far since it's literally got entrances all over the system.
Hey, okay, hi, okay, question. What's up with the boss hanging around the system in the update assistant? Why would they try to delay the update? You think they know about... No, nothing. I'm an idiot. Never mind. Okay, Alex out.
Do you realize you're standing in the middle of the way? There is currently one rogue app running freely around the system, and also an update software totally not completing its loading tour. And you're blocking me from reaching management's office. Finally.
Ok, on m'entend toujours? Oui. Alors, oh sorry, I switched in French. Okay, sorry. Okay, back to English. So that was a sequence in literally the middle of the game. So I hope you could still grasp a little of everything. But yeah, that was the fun part. Let's dive into theory now. Let's dive into the narrative tool set that we use to tell the messages that were conveyed in the bit of story you've just seen. There were two main messages conveyed here. I'm just gonna say it again because it maybe was not so obvious. So OS 9 still doesn't want you to update, even though there's been a tragedy because of it. And secondly, the resistance, like the tiny group of apps that's called the resistance, is actually trying to escape the phone. So there might be a third solution to updating, and we're just grasping it now in the story. Those are the two main messages conveyed in this sequence. Let's talk about the tools used, the narrative tools used to convey those messages. First, we can consider the verbal and textual tools. Alex, well, I'm going to say toolboxes because each of those tools have tools. So let's say verbal toolbox, the textual toolbox. Everything that is said, every word, and every text is a narrative tool already. And in the game medium, we're so lucky to have more tools because we also have visuals, sound, and interactivity. We have even one more than film, we have interactivity. So taking a close-up look at those tools, tool set. The verbal tool set has, for example, VO, the voices in the talkie-walkies, the NPC dialogues together or with us, and the radio shows. If you remember, we even hear radio talking like, oh, there's been an accident, and those are all verbal tools. VO is everything with OS 9, the comments, but also the monologues when he speaks to you. The textual tools, there's a lot. Those are everything that is written, be it graffiti, the posters, the notes the characters leave to each other. The logs are also notes. We try to go as in detail as possible in the written tools. For example, every character has their own handwriting. So you could find a note from one character and always recognize that it's the same character because it's the same handwriting. Even with the graffitis. And I even included here in the textual tools the extra diegetic elements, like the task. It's like not in the diegetic world, but it's still telling a bit of a story, like let's break user privacy with an exclamation mark really means the game pushes you this way. Visual tools, the visuals toolbox is the biggest one. We have so many tools in visuals. Of course, props and architecture. Props is everything, every object you see in every 3D asset, but also the way that their placement, like where they've been used, where they are. Drawings, obviously, like character-made drawings, like this drawing here is telling you how the cloud cannon is used that it's gonna like try to project stuff in the cloud and through the firewall, etc. But also things we always forget about in storytelling, but are very powerful tools, are the lights, the texture, the colors. Lights is first directional to help you guide the player, but also it's telling you something about the mood. The texture is telling you something about the story. I don't know, worn out object, scratch something. It's texture, but it's telling something about the story. And colors in the game, we have a strong dichotomy of colors between OS 9's yellow. Everything that is yellow is OS 9, and everything that is white, bluish is the update. And you'll often see those two colors next to each other. It's trying to show the opposition. The sound toolbox with sound effects, obviously, but also the ambience and the music, the themes of each character through the music. Ambience play a lot of, has a huge role in storytelling. Like, if you remember at the beginning, in the main terminal, like it was like a light, like really not cheerful, but like you could stay here and it's nice, but in the corridors, like it's a little eerie. Those are sounds and ambience. It's very subliminal, but it's still there. And themes that maybe you didn't hear so well, but sometimes you hear like some piano notes. It's really announcing something. Here we had the Resistance theme or Alex's theme through those piano notes. And lastly, but the most important one in games, the interactions toolbox. So everything that is progression and gameplay is also kind of a narrative tool when used well. We have a whole stealth gameplay with the security guards and the progression with the cheat codes. It was not explained so well in the sequence, but we are given cheat codes to progress in the story because OS 9 can give us cheat codes, and we just make a mess with them. So this is gameplay, this is interaction, but this also carries a narrative message. So in short, the thing to remember if you really have a message to say in storytelling is that you have to say it in many different ways, in as many different ways as possible, ideally using as many different narrative tools as possible. It's really the show, don't tell thing. Instead of saying this happened, you show it through everything, everywhere. It's the same message, but it's told in as many different ways as possible. So let's take a couple case studies. Yeah, just very, very soon. A couple case studies. For example, if I want to do some exposition exposition is like information about the background of the word or the story or background of the characters. I want to do some exposition about the fact that the resistance wants to escape the phone because they discovered something. Okay, this is like my statement, and I need to have the story saying it. The statement, we use in the sequence, for example, all those different tools. So you have drawings, props, VO, the talkies also. All of those were saying that the resistance wants to escape the phone and trying to explain it to you also visually, also it's text, but it's like the whole blackboard is talking about it. This is an exposition example. Another example could be like characterization. If you want to characterize a character, it's like depicting the personality of a character. We can take, for example, Alex, the elf app that you've met. It's like the white ninja with the heart, the red heart. Just for a tiny bit of background, this character has like the story of this character is like it's the health app, so the user never used it, obviously. and is very pissed, and is very like he has a lot of grudge about it, and really hates the user of the phone, which is the phone's god for everyone else. So he's like joined the resistance and wants to escape the phone, etc. So how to characterize this guy, this app? One thing, very interesting thing to work with Alex for me was that we almost never see him. Like you see him only 3 times in the game. That was one of them. And he will always like fly away like this. You never really interact and can talk with him. So we characterize him in as many different ways as possible. You always see drawings he makes. You know he's wanted, of course, but you also see that he answers to graffitis of other people. You always hear him and the rest of the resistance talking through talkies, but you cannot interact, but you hear. You see he leaves sticky notes, he's drawing on the walls, etc. So this really, all those different tools really helps characterize this guy without having him saying, I'm pissed about not being used. And lastly, for me, the most interesting thing to do always in storytelling is subtext. Subtext is everything that is said minus the words. So it's really just everything else than the text itself, everything the text is saying without the text. And if you remember in the beginning of the sequence, so before the sequence, some tragedy happened. Then it's just this little aftermath, just before we find the antenna and the resistance's lair. There's just a sequence of the player walking around with OS9, talking, and you just you walk around. And the subtext of this sequence, this bit of the sequence, is like OS9 is saying everything is all right, and the world is saying not at all. And the use of the very different nature of those tools, like everything is all right, was told to you by only OS9, right into your ear constantly, like he talks. If you noticed, he talks way less afterwards. But in this first bit, he's like, no, it's not, let's never talk about it again. Oh, I've got an idea, let's go see the antenna, take a bit of time, trying to make you forget that something bad happened. And the world, in the meantime, while you're having this audio, VO input, the world is saying not at all, like it's literally saying it's all your fault. Like via graffiti, updates on we're all dead, the radio is stating that there's been an accident, we're doomed, etc. So this is really a good way to put those two messages at the same time, literally overlapping via different tools. Voila. So now yours?
Sure. Okay. So as Julia introduced us at the very beginning, I am a game designer and level designer on this project. So I'll be talking a little bit more about the architecture and the space itself and how I conceived it in accordance with Julia's message and story. And the first thing that was set for this sequence from Julia was that it needed to reflect the experience of the character and to identify with what the character would be feeling, which is guilt and to be a bit confused. So that was immersion and identification of that thing specifically. And since we wanted to put the emphasis on that, or what I thought was interesting was to put really the feeling of transgression forward. So pushing the player towards transgression and the feeling of being sort of under the radar and a wanted guy in the system. But also to create a disorienting space because we just went through a shock emotionally before the beginning of the sequence. So these were my starting points when I worked on the corridor that you just saw before. So how do I do that? Now, it's easy to think about it, but we have several tools that Julia also already talked about a little bit, but this is how we put it into the game itself. I really wanted to put the player in a difficult position of not being able to go through the normal way, the perfectly welcoming corridor, but to push him to the sides and to go deeper and deeper into the guts of the system. So the idea is to go in the very small, crawling to the space that you're not supposed to go there. As you can see, you have to delete the sign that tells you danger, don't go there, only maintenance. So you have to go through it. And by forcing the player to do that, it's engaging them into the action of the character. So that was an example. To give you an idea, this is what the corridor looks like from a different perspective. This is from Unity, where we worked on the level design and the conception of the game itself. And it actually looks like that from the distance. You can see a little bit the different areas that we went in. And I would be very interested to know if you pictured it like that from the extract, because it seems a bit of a maze. It's supposed to feel like a maze. But the structure itself is actually super simple. It's just a couple of curves and a corridor that goes straight. But we added some complexity so that it would give the sense of disorientation. And to push the player outside of the basic corridor. So what we did is we added blockers. So the security that you can see here, you've seen in a video, these guys are just always there and blocking the obvious way, reminding you that you should feel guilty because they are trying to arrest you. And we also added layers. So to go deeper in a kind of metaphor, but also literally. And that's how we complexified a very simple space. There's also one thing that was a big challenge with Julia, and we already mentioned it a little bit with Pete. It's the hierarchy of information, and how do you deliver the information to the player? Both Julia and I come from the film industry, actually. We met at film school. So we studied films before doing video games. And in films, you have full control of what the public is going to see, what the viewer is going to experience. Here, we don't really have that in video games because of interaction. So we have to work on how to deliver the information in a way that feels natural, but is at least a little bit controlled. So to create a visual path for the player. And this is just one example. That moment in the game is called the antenna. You've seen it in the playthrough. And here we wanted to create a messy area, a messy space, because that's what the resistance is about. That's how they work. That's how we wanted to characterize them. And it's been a back and forth, a very long back and forth of iterating on how we can make the space look messy, but we can still understand the huge quantity of information one at a time. So this is what it looks like, actually, from the top. And the idea is that you can kind of see the path only from the top, and that you would go from one spot to the other. Always in the corner of your eyes is the next step. So first, you see the first thing. That's what's going to really catch your attention. And then it's already there in the corner of your eyes, and that's going to probably, hopefully, push you to go this way. So we're trying to guide and orient the player without forcing it. So that has been one of the challenge and a great experience to try and create a space such as this one. And lastly, and I think this is the point of all of this. Sure, we want to tell a story, but the story in itself is not enough. That's why we make video games, right? We want to feel the experience, no matter what kind of game. So in order to really have the story impact you and be relevant and exist away from the game, once you're finished, you still have it in you, is to really make the world feel alive. I think that makes a whole lot of difference. Because yes, a broken piece of chalk left behind can tell a story as well. And that's kind of what we try to do, is to make the player feel like when he's not here, something is still happening around him. That's a corridor you go through, and you can see on the floor there are a couple of papers shuffled there because someone came by and wasn't happy about the paper, the wanted poster, and shuffled them. You can probably guess that it's Alex, but you can guess. It really is involving you into the process of visiting the world and discovering it. Same here. You have the interaction of the puzzle of opening the pipe, but you also have everything around that tells you why the pipe is closed, why you have to use the cheat code to go through it, and how the other people in the world did graffiti because they're pissed about it. So this whole concept, this whole process is about telling the story and making you live the story, not just receive it, and give you a bit of space to really take it in. So yes, that's what it takes. It's obviously not exhaustive. We have lots more, but that was the idea. It's like every placement of a prop, every small sticky note, every piece of chalk, and every ceiling really takes you in the story and hopefully makes you really live it. So yeah, thank you so much for being so polite and patient. Thank you.
Merci. Voilà. Merci beaucoup. If everyone's all right with that, we're going to shift to French, if it's good with you.
I did already.
For the panel, for the questions, it might be also easier. So, but feel free to ask a question in English if you have some. Alors, merci beaucoup pour cette présentation extrêmement riche. Extrêmement détaillée aussi de Backfirewall. Une séquence, c'est peut-être la première fois d'ailleurs qu'elle est montrée en public.
Absolument, ouais.
Voilà. Donc on a la chance de... Puisque une démo vient de sortir et puis le jeu va sortir dans les quelques mois qui
D'ici
viennent.
la fin de l'année, le jeu devrait sortir et la démo est disponible aussi à la Villa si des gens sont intéressés par la tester.
D'accord, ouais, c'est ça. Alors à la Villa, au Nifff, le jeu est jouable et là c'est la démo. Donc merci beaucoup pour ce partage. Je découvrais en même temps que tout le monde la séquence et en plus on a eu une analyse en détail de la séquence. Donc merci beaucoup. On l'a peut-être aussi un petit peu ressenti dans la séquence. Moi, j'ai envie de vous poser la même question que j'ai posée à Pete. Il y a toujours un danger, puis ça rejoint un petit peu ce que tu disais aussi, de la surcharge d'informations, ou de la trop grande subtilité, ou du côté un petit peu trop cryptique de certains éléments, ou la difficulté peut-être à transmettre vraiment l'information qu'on a vraiment envie de transmettre. Et donc, c'est vrai que vous avez une mécanique dans votre jeu, on a pu le voir aussi, où on fait disparaître des éléments. Petit à petit, tout à coup, il y a plein de moments où on est face à un espace rempli de caisses où on est bloqué dans un couloir et petit à petit on diminue la charge visuelle qu'on a devant nous pour nous donner accès à différents endroits. Donc je voulais peut-être vous poser la question sur comment vous essayez de trouver justement cet équilibre en fait entre trop d'informations, entre toute la générosité que vous avez très bien montré que vous mettez dans les espaces et puis quand même réussir à garantir que le bon élément, l'élément avec lequel il faut interagir pour avancer peut-être plus loin dans le récit, il est découvert.
Donc là, tu poses surtout une question level design presque.
C'est une question level design, mais c'est aussi comment est-ce que vous vous arrangez entre vous deux pour trouver l'équilibre entre la générosité de tous les textes que tu écris et tous les éléments que tu as envie de mettre dans l'espace, et puis peut-être les playtests où tout à coup vous réalisez qu'en fait les gens ne trouvent pas les éléments disponibles.
Je commence, puis comme ça tu peux rebondir. Ça rejoint un peu ce que je disais tout à l'heure, mais c'est vrai que la manière dont on a travaillé avec Julia et Adriana, qui avait aussi son importance dans ce genre de création, malheureusement elle n'est pas là aujourd'hui, en fait c'était vraiment avec énormément de proximité entre nos départements. On a beaucoup travaillé ensemble, on se connaît depuis très longtemps avec Julia, donc ça aide à anticiper ce qu'elle va vouloir mettre en lumière et comment. Donc, j'essaye pour moi, dans mon état d'esprit, dans le studio, c'est que je me dis, mon but, c'est de faire passer le message de Julia. c'est que je prends la direction qu'elle me donne avec sa boussole, je le mets sur ma boussole et je vais essayer de le rendre cohérent. Donc, si je sais qu'elle va avoir cette charge d'information, j'essaye de créer déjà en amont un espace qui va pouvoir accueillir cette charge d'information. Après, ce qui est difficile et ce qui demande des itérations et des playtests, c'est le rythme. Ça veut dire combien de temps entre chaque information, combien de fois la même information avant qu'elle soit comprise. On parlait de subtilité, c'est pas uniquement dans la forme, mais aussi dans la répétition. Et ça, c'est après quelque chose où les artistes nous ont assez détesté parce qu'on venait modifier un petit peu le niveau dans sa structure assez souvent pour accueillir les informations de manière optimale.
Ouais, comme tu disais, Julia, vous avez besoin d'être dans la scène, en fait,
voilà,
pour vraiment percevoir. Mais justement, alors par rapport à ça, pour toi, cette charge d'informations textuelles, tous ces éléments justement qui vont après apparaître dans l'environnement, comment est-ce qu'ils sont transmis à l'équipe? Est-ce que c'est un script, une sorte d'Excel, de Google Sheet, ou tu écris l'intégralité des textes et tu leur envoies tout ça? Ou est-ce qu'au contraire, tu travailles directement dans la scène et tu arrives à mettre des notes
Pour tout ce qui est visuel, on va plus, en tout cas moi, plus aller directement dans la scène et coller des placeholders de tout, en fait. C'est comme si on mettait un truc en carton, puis on écrit tout moche, ici il y aura ça et tout, mais beaucoup plus directement dedans que de passer par ces espèces d'intermédiaires qui nous ralentissent, où il faut expliquer sur un doc, puis la personne, en plus il y a du lost in translation, où on ne comprend pas vraiment. Là, au moins, on touche tous tout, en fait, vraiment. Ça, oui, ça leur casse les pieds, c'est terrible, mais au moins, c'est vraiment c'est plus clair.
Et j'allais dire, par rapport à la scène de l'antenne, là, justement, c'est un très bon que j'ai montré tout à l'heure. C'est un bon exemple parce que là, on a eu beaucoup d'itérations où moi, j'ai créé un espace qui ne convenait pas justement, je ne me rendais pas compte de la charge d'information qui allait venir. Donc, on est parti sur un premier level, une première structure que Julia a remplie avec, pour moi, quelque chose qui ne fonctionnait pas par rapport à la progression du joueur. Du coup, j'ai refait un pass pour améliorer la structure de la progression. Et là, Julia est venue me voir et dit, il faut qu'on fasse ensemble parce que du coup, ça ne marche plus avec la manière dont les informations sont amenées.
Et tout ça, ça ne marche plus, c'est fait à l'interne ou c'est quand même une série de playtests auprès de...
En playtest, non. Au début, c'est déjà, il y a énormément de choses dont on peut se rendre compte tout seul, en fait. Tout seul au sens dans l'équipe, mais même tout seul, juste de pouvoir immédiatement dire, ah ouais, si je donne cette info-là, puis celle-là, machin, puis tu vois que tu passes complètement à côté. Bon. Tu refais. Donc oui, on teste nous-mêmes beaucoup d'abord avant de... Il faut qu'on soit déjà content du truc avant d'aller le montrer à quelqu'un qui va nous dire « Ah, il y a encore tout ça qui ne marche pas ».
Ouais, je pense qu'on a un niveau d'exigence vis-à-vis de ça qui fait que... Je ne sais pas si c'est quelque chose qui vient du cinéma aussi, d'être obligé d'avoir un résultat quand on est sur un tournage. On filme, il faut que la prise, elle soit là, elle soit bonne, on continue. Et je sais pas, on avait un petit peu cette espèce de ping-pong de se dire « Ok, là, toi, tu veux dire ça ». Moi, je trouve que ça ne marche pas avec le chemin. Qu'est-ce qu'on sacrifie? Comment? Là, tout de suite, on trouve une solution. Donc, on va sacrifier un des deux aspects pour mettre en valeur l'autre. Mais il faut que ce soit constant et cohérent et tout ça. Donc, c'est vraiment un travail très... C'est pour ça que quand je parle de proximité, c'est un petit peu la dynamique qu'on pourrait trouver sur un plateau de tournage où quand on est un peu bloqué face à quelque chose, l'objectif ne marche pas avec ce décor, comment on fait? Et on prend une décision là tout de suite maintenant. Et ensuite, on le montre au reste de l'équipe, mais assez vite, on se rend compte si déjà la base, elle fonctionne. On a eu quelques surprises, c'est sûr. En fait, ça ne marche pas du tout, mais quand même, en général, on arrive à partir sur un truc...
Mais alors peut-être, parlons plus de ça en détail, parce que vous l'avez déjà mentionné. Julia, à ton avis, cet héritage d'études en cinéma, est-ce que tu identifies, alors on a dit cette idée aussi d'être assez ensemble, de partager, il y a presque, dans ce qui me semble tu me dis, il y a presque cette idée du moment, un peu de l'instant prégnant du tournage où il faut que le plan il marche, on a l'impression qu'il y a aussi un petit peu ça dans ce que tu dis. Est-ce qu'il y a des outils ou des manières de travailler ou d'écrire les scripts ou même, toi tu as beaucoup été aussi impliqué dans la production et dans la gestion aussi en partie du projet. Est-ce que tu as l'impression qu'il y a des choses que tu retrouves dans la production d'un jeu comme celui-là?
Oui, je pense qu'il est même très à mi-chemin avec un film, en fait. Nous, on fait tu avais joué à Answer Not, en plus, notre précédent jeu.
Qui est donc le jeu que vous avez produit avant.
Voilà, on disait en rigolant que c'était un court-métrage du jeu vidéo, quoi. C'est une histoire dans laquelle, par chance, tu peux te balader et interagir et toi-même aller chercher, si tu veux, plus d'infos, ce truc de genre aller, ce qu'il a dit avant Pete avec critical optional. Il y a les infos critiques qui te sont balancées comme ça, les cutscenes et tout, puis il y a tout ce qui est optional. Beaucoup de gens vont passer à côté, mais quelques complétionnistes vont tout lire et tout, voilà. Mais sinon, oui, je pense tout l'héritage mise en scène, tout le côté... il y a quand même on a beaucoup de cutscenes qui sont... C'est des mini-films, en fait. On a beaucoup de scènes de cinématiques. Tout le côté musique, ambiance, toute l'ambiance avec le son, le jeu des acteurs. Enfin, moi, en tout cas, je suis très attachée à avoir beaucoup de personnages très différents, puis qu'ils aient tous une voix. Et ça, je pense que tout ça, ça vient du cinéma, ouais.
Donc, tu veux dire aussi la direction, justement, des comédiens.
Ouais,
ça, quelque chose on a vu que la voix était aussi très présente, qu'il y avait des échanges assez intenses, des accélérations, toute une rythmique. D'ailleurs, le jeu rend très très bien quand on le laisse tourner comme ça, sans qu'il soit foncièrement manipulé.
Oui, c'est pour ça qu'on a fait à la base, on voulait faire un playthrough commenté, puis après on est là,
il parle tout le temps de toute
façon. Voilà, le jeu parle tout seul bien assez. Donc,
Et juste pour rebondir sur l'histoire du cinéma et de notre héritage, parce qu'on est quand même dans un festival de films, ça donne envie de faire le pont entre les deux. Il apparaît de plein de manières, et c'est assez intéressant. On a même des fois des petits réflexes de plateau de tournage ou de production de films, où des fois, moi, je vais venir changer les matériaux pour tricher. Je vais les mettre gris à la place de blanc, comme les costumières, elles ont des différentes teintes de gris pour leur t-shirt selon la lumière du chef-op. Je vais avoir tendance à faire ce genre de choses aussi, de bricoler un peu comme ça. On est vraiment des bricoleuses, hein. On ne connaît pas hyper bien les softs, donc on va faire avec ce qu'on a, mais on a de la ressource grâce à ça, en fait. Ça nous permet de rebondir super vite, sans connaître en détail les outils de base du jeu vidéo. Et comme disait Julia, d'avoir ces connaissances de mise en scène et l'importance énorme que peut avoir la lumière, les couleurs. Justement, c'est un peu toute l'idée du talk, mais de raconter l'histoire à travers les environnements, les costumes, si on peut dire, le character design, tous ces trucs-là, c'est aussi important que juste OS9 qui parle, quoi. Et ça, je pense on espère que ça marchera dans le jeu au final et que les gens seront impactés, qu'ils s'en rendent compte ou non, parce que c'est vrai qu'on a tout mis on a mis énormément là-dedans, dans ces petites choses.
Et pour reprendre justement cette distinction qu'avait fait Pete entre critical et optional, donc vraiment avoir plus un design narratif qui va s'orienter en laissant la place à plein de... Enfin voilà, accepter que potentiellement il y a une certaine quantité de joueuses ou de joueurs qui ratent 80% du contenu. Et vous situez Backfirewall par rapport à cet équilibre à quel niveau? Si vous imaginez quelqu'un qui se contente uniquement d'actionner ce qu'il doit actionner, qui va très peu peut-être dans tous les différents éléments que vous avez mis, vous situez plutôt vers quel type de design, votre approche?
Vers quel type de design? On a en tout cas beaucoup souffert de plein de playtests qui nous ont dit on comprend rien, et puis on a fait beaucoup ce que je disais à Pete, on est revenu en arrière de beaucoup de subtilités, on espérait que les gens aient l'envie de comprendre tout seul et tout, puis non, ils passent tout droit, donc on bloque, c'est un peu, même des fois un peu triché, tu sais, mais où tu vas, puis on bloque, on met une cutscene, comme ça ils sont obligés de voir ce perso, sinon tout le monde va le louper. C'est notre premier jeu, c'est notre premier long jeu. On va s'affiner, je sens. Là, on est encore un peu dans il faut être sûr que tout soit compris. Et puis, donc, au moins là maintenant, on sait que tout est compréhensible, en tout cas de la plupart des playtests qu'on a eus dans notre bêta actuelle. Mais encore un peu...
Il y a quand même une énorme face cachée de l'iceberg, un peu comme ça. Je pense que tu peux... Et ça, c'était en fait assez rapidement pendant l'alpha, pendant le développement de la phase alpha du jeu, où on a eu ces premières critiques de compréhension globale et tout, où on s'est dit, OK, maintenant, c'est notre nouvel objectif, c'est qu'on ait un niveau de lecture sur la surface qui permette de comprendre et de profiter du jeu. Donc je pense que tu peux traverser tout le jeu et quand même t'amuser et comprendre l'histoire de base. Et c'est pas grave si tu comprends pas exactement tous les détails sur qui est la résistance. C'est un téléphone qui veut pas s'updater, voilà. Et tu t'amuses pendant et que c'est joli et que c'est rigolo. Après, il y a pratiquement un autre jeu pour les gens qui sont intéressés d'aller chercher, comprendre, qui ont envie de s'impliquer en fait. Et bien là, c'est un petit peu ce qu'on se disait la dernière fois, c'est qu'avec Julia, il faut que ce soit qu'il y ait une récompense pour les gens qui ont envie. Parce que nous, on aurait envie, en tant que joueuse, on ne peut pas forcer les joueurs tous à avoir cette envie, mais en tout cas, on a envie de récompenser ceux qui vont aller chercher ces informations et qui vont essayer de faire des liens entre les indices, entre les personnages et tout ça. Ben, ça existe, c'est là. Faut juste aller le chercher. Donc c'est un peu 2 niveaux de lecture.
Merci beaucoup. J'ai encore une question peut-être avant d'ouvrir et de donner la possibilité, de vous donner la possibilité de poser des questions si vous en avez. Enfin, moi j'ai encore toute une liste évidemment, mais vous nous avez aussi présenté le trailer au moment du reveal, hein, qui a eu lieu lors du PC Gaming Show, je crois, c'est ça, oui, un grand événement justement durant le mois de juin, international. Et puis là aussi, il y a quelque chose d'intéressant, c'est que alors, c'est quelque chose qui revient assez souvent hein, quand on parle de jeux narratifs, c'est cette espèce de danger, effectivement, de perdre un peu la première fois, le premier moment où on est dans un environnement, le premier moment où on vit l'histoire. Et puis, il y a ce danger, effectivement, que les joueurs, par exemple, la première fois qu'ils tombent sur le jeu, ce soit lors d'un stream, et donc que l'histoire leur soit un petit peu gâchée. Et vous trouvez la bonne solution, et je me demandais justement si elle venait de vous, de votre publisher peut-être, de même rajouter encore une couche supplémentaire narrative dans le trailer même, où le trailer lui-même est toute une histoire, où en gros votre générosité continue donc jusque-là. Et donc est-ce que ça c'était quelque chose que dès le début vous aviez prévu de faire, ce trailer, qui vous est venu petit à petit, ou est-ce que c'est votre publisher qui vous a tout de suite dit non mais il faut rien révéler trop précis du jeu?
Ah non, c'était même pas tant dans une idée de pas révéler, c'était juste que c'était c'est vite très, très plat, en fait, niveau gameplay, de montrer juste quelqu'un qui marche et tout. On était là, ne surtout pas se faire tag walking sim trop vite.
D'accord.
Et la démarche derrière le trailer, donc non, c'était pas du tout le publisher, ils étaient même pas un truc méga classique, on était un peu non. Du coup, la démarche, c'était plus, ça revient au show don't tell, tu vois. Il faut réussir à dire que c'est un jeu de rôle sans dire c'est un jeu de rôle. Donc, faire un truc drôle avec 1 minute 30.
Ouais.
Et puis, montrer qu'il y aura de l'humour un peu méta, que ce perso, il est marrant, tout ça, pitché, mais c'est rien, 1 minute 30 pour raconter. C'est un téléphone, il y a une update, il y a un machin, tout ça. Donc, ok, ce sera le perso qui a perdu le trailer, voilà. Tu vois. Puis tu vois tout de suite que c'est drôle, tu vois le ton, tu vois un peu... On s'est un peu fait clasher sur le fait qu'il n'y a pas de gameplay montré. Il y en a en plus, il y a 10 secondes au début, mais... Tout le monde a dit sur YouTube, on voit pas de gameplay. Alors, du coup, on est un peu allé trop loin, je crois.
Non, mais c'est vrai que c'était un risque qu'on assume complètement parce qu'on avait envie de se démarquer. C'est vrai que notre jeu, il n'est pas classique sur plein de points. Il est un peu bizarre, on l'aime bien comme ça. Et on avait envie de continuer à l'identifier comme tel, même dans sa communication. Et en plus, c'est vrai qu'avec le personnage d'OS 9 et puis tout le ton un peu méta du jeu, il y a un potentiel de fou pour aller... au-delà, vraiment dans l'extra-diégétique, que OS 9 sorte de la diégèse du jeu pour venir chercher les joueurs, quoi. Ça représentait beaucoup plus le jeu que d'avoir quelque chose de classique, outre le fait qu'en plus on garde la surprise de ce que c'est. Donc c'était le risque de se dire on va perdre des gens qui ont besoin de savoir pour jouer, mais ceux qui sont curieux, ils vont très probablement rester du coup.
Ouais, et puis si ça les agace suffisamment pour venir
c'est
écrire
ça.
un commentaire,
Ils vont venir voir,
ils vont rester. Non, c'est vrai que peut-être effectivement, je le réalise là en parlant, on est quand même dans une approche en termes de public qui est assez unique. On pense peu à des jeux vraiment comiques, avec vraiment l'envie, justement, un jeu principalement humoristique. Jeux vidéo, en tout cas, c'est moins ceux-là qu'on tendance à mettre en avant, ou alors c'est des univers, peut-être, humoristiques. Et puis, mélangé avec une sorte de SF. Je ne sais pas si vous-même vous incluez dans la SF, mais enfin, en tout cas, on a quelque chose de très, très tech, quoi. On est vraiment beaucoup dans l'univers technologique, dans de l'humour par rapport à ça. Est-ce qu'on a des questions, peut-être, dans la salle? J'ouvre déjà le panel, la disponibilité du micro. Je vois une main qui se lève au milieu. Merci.
On va essayer de voir qui nous parle.
Ouais, on ne vous voit pas du tout. Donc,
Bonjour, merci beaucoup pour votre présentation, c'était vraiment super intéressant. Moi j'avais une question peut-être plutôt au niveau des process de développement, ce serait plus sur la partie justement playtest. Est-ce que vous avez une manière particulière de récupérer l'opinion des gens qui testent votre jeu? Est-ce que vous leur posez simplement des questions ou bien ils doivent décrire leur ressenti, par exemple, pour évaluer à quel point ils ont été immergés dans votre univers, dans votre quête. Est-ce que vous avez une certaine méthodologie qui vous permet en gros d'extraire vraiment ce que le joueur a vécu en jouant à votre jeu?
Tu veux répondre? Ou bien, merci pour ta question. Je peux, si tu veux, comme tu veux. En gros, si tu veux, il y a eu un petit peu 2 phases pour tout ce qui est playtest. La première, c'est quand on n'était que nous, et c'était très organique. Donc c'était déjà de montrer aux personnes dans un cercle moyennement étendu. Ça, c'était peut-être juste avant mon temps, mais c'était très organique, et c'était juste de voir est-ce que déjà la personne rentre dans l'expérience ou pas, et qu'est-ce qu'ils comprennent, les joueurs. Et ensuite, on a eu une chance assez incroyable, c'est que notre publisher, en fait, s'est chargé de gérer tout ce qui était feedback UX. Et c'est beaucoup eux qui ont organisé des playtests, mais à grande échelle, avec nous, nos directives ou nos demandes, en fait. Qu'est-ce qu'on voulait que les joueurs comprennent? Et peut-être ça, Julia, je peux te laisser répondre, mais c'était vraiment très, très encadré, hyper précis par des gens qui s'y connaissent très bien. Et ça, on a eu cette chance-là. Donc, peut-être par rapport aux questions.
Ouais, on a la chance d'avoir un publisher ils ont une entière division UX, User Experience, machin, tout ça. Ils nous ont demandé une espèce de feuille de route de qu'est-ce que vous voulez qu'il soit retenu quand, tout ça. Et ils sont partis ils sont revenus avec un document mais hyper précis, vraiment test qualitatif, quantitatif. Donc, en vrai, on peut même pas vraiment répondre. Mais en tout cas, à recevoir, c'était super. C'était super utile, quoi. Alors, on a tout ce que... OK, personne n'a compris ça au début. OK, tout le monde adore ce personnage. Pourquoi ces trucs-là? Donc, ouais, je ne sais pas exactement comment ils font, mais ils ont je pense, des immenses questionnaires où vraiment qualitatif, quoi. C'est pas oui, non, c'est tu t'écris des trucs et tout.
Puis ils les enregistraient. Ouais. Et surtout, un truc hyper important qui nous a, je pense, nous, en tant que personne, beaucoup aidé, parce qu'on est super... on est tellement impliqués et on met toute notre âme dans ce jeu que c'est difficile de recevoir de manière brute les feedbacks. Et l'avantage de passer par notre publisher, c'est qu'il filtrait les réponses, de manière à nous amener les informations comment tu dis, qui nous aidaient à améliorer, quoi, constructives. Et du coup, de nous filtrer en gros, cette partie de la population des joueurs n'ont pas trop compris ça, mais bon, voilà. Et ils nous forçaient absolument pas à changer. Donc on avait, nous, la full liberté après de corriger ou non. Mais l'avantage, c'est qu'on n'avait pas à trier et à être déprimé pendant des jours parce que personne n'aimait ce qu'on faisait. Donc ça on a de la chance pour ça. Ouais.
Merci beaucoup pour la question. Est-ce que quelqu'un d'autre aurait une question, une remarque? Oui, je vois devant. Oh, Fabio. Oh, OK.
Bonjour, merci pour la présentation, c'était super. Vous avez parlé tout à l'heure un petit peu du fait de forcer le joueur dans des cinématiques pour être sûr qu'il ait acquis une information et qu'il puisse continuer. Est-ce que vous avez considéré un petit peu l'option de peut-être rendre une information nécessaire à la poursuite du jeu pour le joueur et le verrouiller tant qu'il ne l'a pas, mais implicitement comme le fait par exemple Outer Wild ou ce genre de jeu?
Ouais, alors, j'aimerais bien savoir faire ce que fait Outer Wilds. Non, alors, je vois ce que tu veux dire. Ouais, c'est quelque chose qu'on a testé de plein de manières. Comme disait Julia, comme c'est notre premier jeu, on est encore en pleine phase d'apprentissage un petit peu de ces choses. Ça, c'est vraiment pour nous un des trucs qui a été le plus difficile à équilibrer, entre forcer le joueur en le bloquant et le laisser explorer et il risque de louper le truc. Comme on est vraiment dans une narration qui est quand même assez verbeuse, puisqu'on a OS9 qui parle, c'était difficile, si tu veux, d'utiliser le gameplay lui-même. Vu que c'est un peu de l'exploration, tu peux juste deleter des trucs et tout. Ce qu'on a essayé de faire à quelques reprises quand même, c'était d'amener le joueur à comprendre certaines informations à travers des puzzles qu'il devait résoudre. Mais c'est vrai que majoritairement, quand on parle d'informations qui doivent passer par des cutscenes, c'est par exemple, je pense à Alex, le personnage d'Alex, qui va sauter et sauver un personnage en arrière-plan. C'est difficile de le faire passer dans le gameplay directement, vu notre gameplay. Ce serait absolument idéal et ça serait un de nos objectifs pour la suite, c'est d'essayer de vraiment travailler pour améliorer ça et éviter de devoir bloquer le joueur. Ça, c'est ce qu'il y a de plus beau, quoi. Donc, complètement d'accord sur l'élégance justement d'Outer Wild à faire ça. Mais je sais pas si nous ça marcherait parce que Outer Wild est très silencieux et il laisse l'espace au joueur complètement de comprendre les choses à son rythme, alors que là c'est quand même beaucoup plus dirigé. Donc c'est un peu plus difficile. Mais
si vous jouez à la démo, vous avez déjà une bonne idée justement de ces espaces un petit peu plus fermés où on nous donne une liste d'objectifs à remplir et en gros on peut pas sortir de l'espace tant qu'on n'a pas rempli cette liste, ce qui garantit aussi qu'on va repasser à de nombreuses reprises, ce que montrait un peu moins la séquence que vous avez ici, mais qui sont des espaces un peu plus clos où là pour le coup on va un peu plus
c'est vrai que
naviguer au même endroit.
Ouais, parce qu'en fait, cette séquence, il faut le dire, n'est pas représentative complètement du gameplay. C'est une séquence assez narrative, en tout cas, où il y avait tous les outils narratifs qu'on avait envie d'exposer aujourd'hui. Mais la plupart des lieux qu'on va visiter, par exemple la RAM, tout ça, le GPU et autres, en fait, on est un petit peu plus libre de se balader, d'essayer de comprendre comment fonctionnent les puzzles ou les petites interactions, et on sait qu'il nous faut ça pour pouvoir avancer, et c'est à nous d'aller les chercher. Donc il y a un petit peu plus ça, mais c'est vraiment plus pour des informations très narratives qu'on va être parfois obligé de bloquer un petit peu le joueur encore. Si ça répond à ta question, j'espère.
Fabio, you had a question? Combien de l'histoire était claire au début du développement, excusez, et combien ça a développé itératif dans le procès?
Tu dis à quel point le scénario a changé? Ou du début, à cause des playtests ou
You can probably just ask in English if you want to translate.
I'm sorry. It's more about like, did you have the whole story with the main story beats clear from the beginning of development, or was it also something?
I wish.
No.
Okay.
No.
I've become a very personal nightmare of our publisher because I literally rewrote from scratch 3 times after we signed. So, absolutely not. It's like, you remember this lasagna metaphor we made just before. It also works within our own work of you do something, you plan something. It works in your head because you're missing all those close-up things, then you go close-up and you're like, oh, it doesn't work at all. So you come back like not close-up and okay, I'm going to rewrite the beat here, and then back and oh, actually this character is gone. And the artist like, really? And then, oh, actually, this, and no, really, I think the ending, the ending, by the way. This ending, the way it is now.
Don't tell it.
No, I'm not going to say, but it is so fresh.
Recent. We did it at last minute, we changed the ending, yes.
And when you play the game now, I feel like this. When you you see the story, it makes so much sense, and you're like, it obviously was planned this way, but not at all.
That's what's awesome about when you make a game and you put so much effort into details and into environment and characters and stuff, that at the end, if you're stuck on something, you just finish everything else. You're like, okay, that's the only outcome. It sort of tells the story itself. And that was the only thing that worked because it just was that way. Kind of like what Stephen King would say of you just have to uncover the story that already exists. The connection are there when you set the base of your story. And then sometimes it takes a little bit of time to find it, but it's there and you need to find the right one. And we changed everything so many times also because we are learning how to make video game at the same time as we are making a video game. So we really went through so many phases of learning how to convey some story, and we didn't really know how people would react. Do people who like that kind of game will want some puzzles or not? And the most important thing was that we wanted the design and the narration to be in harmony. So if we changed one, we had to change the other. And that was a lot of work, a lot of pressure all the time.
Thank you, merci.
Merci.
On a encore le temps pour... merci Fabio. Pour peut-être une question. Une dernière question. Je vérifie. Oui, non, on a encore un petit peu de temps. Si quelqu'un a encore une question à poser à Narawen. Peut-être un petit peu plus général alors. J'ai cru voir. Non. Peut-être, comme à la fin du dernier panel, en fait, l'idée étant d'ouvrir un tout petit peu plus, en fait, de partir de votre jeu et de votre expérience pour peut-être ouvrir un tout petit peu plus sur l'industrie du jeu vidéo ou le médium qu'est le jeu vidéo, le langage spécifique qui est le langage du jeu vidéo. Comment est-ce que vous placez ou vous vous placerez dans le futur? Qu'est-ce que vous voulez comment est-ce que vous considérez déjà, à l'heure actuelle, l'industrie du jeu vidéo? Alors ça peut être ici en Suisse, mais comme ça peut être aussi à l'international. Et puis, qu'est-ce que peut-être vous avez envie d'y amener, ou comment est-ce que vous imaginez que le langage vidéoludique va potentiellement progresser? C'est une grande question.
Ouais.
Ça, c'est typiquement, il me faut au moins 2 minutes.
Alors, je commence et tu rajoutes après. Voilà, comme ça, c'est parfait. Moi, je trouve que c'est hyper excitant de bosser dans le jeu vidéo aujourd'hui parce que c'est en plein mouvement. Le champ des possibilités, il est immense et ça donne envie d'expérimenter, mais complètement, quoi. C'est super aussi parce que je pense, grâce à la technologie qui s'améliore constamment, ça crée des ponts de plus en plus entre les médiums, que ce soit justement le jeu vidéo et le film, vu qu'on est là au Nifff. Et ça donne envie de créer de plus en plus des formes hybrides et des nouvelles formes de narration, d'histoire, d'expérience en général, en fait. Nous, dans l'équipe, on vient tous d'horizons différents. Comme on disait, Julia et moi, on vient du film à la base. Adriana, qui est notre programmeuse, elle vient de la neuroscience, donc elle apporte aussi encore une fois un bagage différent. On est toutes les trois super intéressées par la notion d'expérience, d'immersion. Je pense que ça, c'est quand même un peu le truc. Et c'est un médium parfait pour ça. On est limité par nos propres capacités, connaissances dans le jeu vidéo, encore parce qu'on vient d'arriver. Mais je pense qu'on a vraiment envie d'explorer encore plus loin, justement, ces notions d'immersion et de raconter. Julia parlait de subtilité, mais d'essayer de faire peut-être aussi des formes différentes de jeux. Donc, comme l'idée des courts-métrages, je pense à No Code qui avait fait des petites short stories en jeu vidéo qui s'appelaient Stories Untold. Que moi, ça m'avait tellement inspiré justement de me dire mais on peut faire des formes différentes que juste un jeu de 5 heures parce qu'il est label indépendant et qu'il est narratif. On peut faire tout ce qu'on veut. En fait, et ça, c'est super, super intéressant et ça donne envie de continuer à créer, quoi.
Julia?
Est-ce que j'ai fini de réfléchir? Non, pour répondre à l'autre moitié de la question qui était où nous, on se voit en tant que studio, c'est drôle parce que j'imagine que la plupart des studios auraient une... J'entends beaucoup parler de ces studios indés qui disent « Ok, on vise tel genre de scope et on fait des jeux gentiment pour s'affiner, pour arriver à ce scope-là, ou juste perfectionner ses propres tools, ou je ne sais pas quoi. » Nous, on s'est dit avec celui-là qu'on n'avait pas forcément envie de faire plus grand, tu vois, de scope.
Bon, mieux,
mais pas plus grand. Mais on pourrait avoir des envies de double A, tu vois.
Oui, je comprends.
Après, on n'en sait rien.
Donc, d'un studio qui serait un studio de 50, 60 ou 70 personnes.
Et puis qui ferait un Life is Strange, un machin de 30 heures, tu vois. Pas forcément. Je pense qu'on est assez à l'aise dans ce petit format qui est quand même un 5-6 heures. Et on va pas aller non plus dans des trucs complètement rien à voir de gameplay. Donc, on n'est déjà pas très loin. On veut juste faire mieux, mais pas forcément méga différent, pas beaucoup plus grand. Pas
forcément plus, pas forcément...
Voilà.
Ouais.
Je pense différent. Alors, je sais pas, et je pense qu'on a tout un petit peu nos envies dans le studio. Mais l'exploration, l'expérimentation, moi, c'est ce qui me pousse à continuer à la création. Créer un lien avec les joueurs, faire ressentir vraiment des trucs forts, et puis faire s'échapper le temps d'un jeu, quoi. Donc l'idée d'explorer soit des technologies, mais alors ça c'est peut-être un petit peu moins notre dada de base, mais soit des formats de storytelling différents, et puis là je trouve que déjà on est sur un concept qui est qui sort de l'habitude, avec ce OS 9 qui est l'OS d'un téléphone, qui nous parle tout le long, puis qui sort presque du jeu, même dans la com, il y a ce côté très méta et tout ça. Ça, c'est quelque chose qui m'a tout de suite attiré quand Julia m'a pitché le jeu, et qui ouvre les possibilités de création, mais complètement. Donc ouais, peut-être de continuer assez humblement à faire des petits jeux, pas forcément les jeux les plus jolis, les plus fous dans le gameplay, tout ça, mais qui vont venir encore plus cristalliser la narration, le gameplay. Ouais. Moi, personnellement, j'ai envie d'aller plus loin dans les puzzles et vraiment dans l'élégance du gameplay, et évidemment l'accorder avec les super histoires de Julia, c'est clair.
Merci infiniment pour votre présence, pour votre générosité, pour la présentation. Merci à Pete qui nous entend depuis Manchester. Merci au Nifff pour l'accueil, pour ce panel Environmental Storytelling. Et puis, on se retrouve après pour The Art of Self-Improvement, où on accueillera donc le studio Veuvezan de Vevey, Suisse Digital Kingdom avec leur jeu Swordship, et puis l'équipe française de Slow Clap qui ont sorti récemment le merveilleux Sifu.
Est-ce que je peux dire un dernier mot de remerciement,
Bien sûr,
parce que c'est super important quand même,
ça.
là, parce que nous c'est évident, mais on aimerait quand même dire que ça fait 10 ans qu'on se connaît, que quand on s'est connus, on était déjà à fond à vouloir participer au Nifff, et qu'on venait voir des films, et qu'on faisait des courts-métrages pour les envoyer au Nifff, et qui n'ont évidemment jamais été retenus, avec 3 bouts de ficelle, et que c'était notre rêve. Mais c'est ça, c'était notre rêve d'être sur un écran du Nifff, quoi. Et puis on s'est rendu compte en venant là, purée, mais ça y est, on est là, et c'est incroyable de faire partie de tout ça, donc merci mille fois pour...
Vous pouvez dormir paisiblement.
C'est vraiment achievement unlocked. Super.
Voilà, merci pour tout, merci. Et puis à bientôt.
Merci.